Hello, everyone, and welcome to another live session of English as a Second Language, ESL 001 for Saylor Academy. This week, we are going to be going over some extra practice from best practices and things to know and questions we've gotten on discourse from our students. And to take us through that is Saylor Academy's own Kate. Kate, you can take it away.
Hello, welcome everyone. My name is Kate, like Mike said, and I'm part of the education team here at Saylor. Krista will be returning next week to cover prepositions and conjunctions. And like Mike said, this week we'll be doing some extra practice problems for you all to work on. So the first thing we're going to do today is an activity where you are going to look at this photo and identify a noun and an adjective that can describe the photo. And then I want you to think of a pronoun that can replace it. So for example, you might say, I see a busy street. And then you would say, I see it. So I'll give you a few minutes to think of an adjective and noun, and then a pronoun to replace it. Feel free to put your answers in the chat or just write them down for yourself. All right, if there's no answers in the chat, Mike, we'll move on to the next exercise.
We have some chats down here. There are people talking about people crossing the street, and we have some. There are people crossing it at the pedestrian crossing.
Yeah, those are some great descriptions. Wonderful. All right, yeah, and we could say, yeah, they are crossing it, if we wanted to say there are pedestrians crossing in the crosswalk. Great, so now we're going to move on to the next activity. So it's a similar example. So look at the photo and then come up with a noun and an adjective that describes what you see in the photo, and then think of a pronoun as well that might replace it. So you might say, I see some colorful books, and then you would say, I see them. So again, I'll give you a few moments to think of some answers and put them in the chat if you'd like.
All right, Kate. Well, we have some answers coming in here for you. Um, uh, one says that the light is bright. Um, we also have I see a blue vase in the chat.
Yeah, those are some great answers. Yeah, I see bright lights, or I see a bright light. I see a blue vase. So yeah, you might say, I see them for I see bright lights, or I see it for I see a blue vase. All right, great. We'll move on to the next activity then. So now I'm going to go over some common mistakes with nouns and pronouns. That's a part of speech we addressed in the first live series. So what I want you to do is to look at each example. What is a possible mistake here? And then how can we make the sentence better? What changes can we make? So the first sentence is, I love my dog Percy. It is a very good dog. This morning, my brother ate a bananas for breakfast. 3, there are many trees at the park. It is very tall. 4, my family are very big. I have 6 brothers and 4 sisters. And 5, how many children do you have? So take a moment, look at these sentences, and think about how you might improve them and where the mistakes might be. You can put your answers in the chat again if you want to. I'll give you a few moments.
All right, Kate. Well, we have some answers coming in here. Uh, Josephine says 5 children, not children's. For I guess that would be for number 5.
Yeah, great.
Yep. Also for number 4, my family is, not are. For number 1, I love my dog Percy. It is very good.
Okay, cool. So now I can move on to the answer key. So for the first sentence, we would want to say, I love my dog Percy. He is a very good dog. So while you might refer to animals using the pronoun it, it's actually more common in English if we know the gender of the dog to use he or she. And if you're familiar with the animal, you would want to use he or she. It is a bit impersonal. So moving on to question number 2, we would want to say, this morning my brother ate a banana for breakfast, or you would want to say, my brother ate bananas for breakfast. In this case, right, we use the article a when it's a singular noun, and then we don't use it if it's a plural noun. So either correction is fine here. For number 3, there are many trees at the park. They are very tall. So in this case, right, very tall is describing trees, and trees are plural. So we'd want to say they are. We could, right, so it could refer to park, but it's not logical to say the park is very tall. Clearly here we're discussing the trees. So question number 4, we would want to say, my family is very big. I have 6 brothers and 4 sisters. So yeah, the person in the chat was correct. We'd want to say is. That's because family is a singular noun, even though there might be multiple people in your family. And then number 5 is, how many children do you have? So again, the person in the chat was correct when they said that we would want to say children. Children is the plural of child. So child is the singular, and then children is the plural. We don't need S here. Great. So now we're going to move on to the next activity, which is looking at common mistakes with adjectives. So again, we're going to want to look at each example, think of what a possible mistake here is, and then correct it. So the first sentence is, she is a woman funny. Second, I have a black new car. Third, he is a more better student than I am. 4, the house has 3 rooms. 5, Emma feels boring in class and wants to go home. So again, I'll give you a few moments, think of what the answers might be here, and put them in the chat if you'd like.
Well, we already got a lot of answers rolling in here from a lot of people. Looking very good. She's a funny woman. Uh, uh, I have a new black car. It's small, not smalls. So I think we can probably, if you're ready, move on to the answer key. A lot of good answers around here.
All right, great. Yeah, glad to hear it. Those all sound correct to me. So I'll go through the answers here and explain a little bit why. So for number 1, we would want to say, she is a funny woman. Again, that's because an adjective goes before the noun. In English, that's how we do our placement of adjectives. So then for number 2, we would want to say, I have a new black car. Professor Krista covered royal order of adjectives, I believe, last session. So in this case, this is applying the royal order of adjectives. Generally speaking, you might want to memorize these, but it sounds like a lot of you did well in identifying this error chat. So good job there. That can be difficult for new learners. Number 3, he is a better student than I am. More here is unnecessary because better is already a comparative adjective, so we don't need to say more. Number 4, the house has 3 small rooms. Again, we don't change adjectives so that way to reflect if a noun is plural or singular like other languages do. The adjective will always stay the same regardless. So then number 5, Emma feels bored in class and wants to go home. In this case, we would want to say bored because bored is a feeling versus boring, which is a description of something. So we're saying that Emma feels bored versus describing, right, a characteristic of something, in which case we would use boring. So if we wanted to say, we could say, for example, the class is boring, and thus Emma feels bored. Great, we'll move on to the next one. If you have any questions, you can feel free to put them in the chat and they'll be addressed there. Great, so now we're gonna do a new activity, working with adjectives, verbs, and adverbs in different parts of speech. So these 3 sentences each describe an animal. And what I want you to do is guess the animal and then identify the different parts of speech in each of these sentences. So for this first sentence, I live in the wild, I run fast and hunt well. I am tan and black in color. So what animal do you think that is? And then identify the different parts of speech in those sentences. And then number 2, I climb trees easily and live in the branches. I eat bugs and bananas happily. So again, what animal do you think that is? And then identify the different parts of speech. 3, I move slowly on land, but I am often in the water. I carry protection with me always. What animal do you think that is? And then what parts of speech are here that you can identify? An example might be, I live with people, I love to play, I am man's best friend. In this case, these sentences describe a dog. So I'll give you a few moments to answer these questions and identify the parts of speech. Again, put them in the chat if you'd like.
Well, we have some answers coming in here for with a lot of uh, the animal answers, and we're starting to get some answers too about some the parts of speech, which is good. That's
All right, perfect. We can move on to the answer key then. All right, so for the first question, I live in the wild, I run fast and hunt well. The answer here is a cheetah. It's okay if you didn't get it right with what animal it might be. That's not important. What's more important is correctly identifying the different parts of speech. So here, I, right, is a pronoun, live is a verb, in the is parts of speech that Professor Krista will talk about later. So all of these that are not highlighted, Professor Krista will discuss in later live sessions. Wild is a noun, I another pronoun, run is a verb, fast is an adverb, hunt is a verb, well is an adverb, I is a pronoun, am is a verb, tan is an adjective, black is another adjective, and color is a noun. So great job if you guessed the animal correctly. I'm not sure if I would have even with this example, so good job. We'll move on to the next one. So the answer for number 2 is a monkey. Here we would say I, right, is the pronoun. Climb is the verb, trees is the noun, easily is an adverb, live is a verb, branches is a noun, I is a pronoun, eat a verb, bugs a noun, bananas a noun, and happily is another adverb. So great job to everyone who guessed this animal correctly. Now for the third one, the answer is a turtle. Again, I is a pronoun, move is a verb, slowly is an adverb, land is a noun, I is a pronoun, am is a verb, often an adverb, water a noun, I a pronoun, carry a verb, protection is a noun, me is a pronoun, and always is an adverb. So again, good job if you guessed that one correctly. Now we will move on to more example sentences and common mistakes with verbs. So I want you again to look at each example, say what a possible mistake is, and then how can we make each sentence better? So 1, last night the neighbor writes a letter. 2, she waked up at 5 a.m. yesterday. And 3, the students studies in the library together. I'll give you a few moments to come up with what the correct answers might be here.
We seem to be getting some good answers here in the chat, so I think we probably transition to the next slide here if we're ready. If I think everyone's had enough time.
All right, great. So now for the answers here. So we would want to say last night the neighbor wrote a letter. This is because last night indicates that we should use the past tense in this sentence. So the past tense here, right, would be wrote. For number 2, we would want to say she woke up at 5 a.m. yesterday. This is because woke is the proper way to conjugate this verb, right? It's an irregular verb, so we would want to conjugate it as woke, not as waked. For number 3, we want to say the students study in the library together. In this case, right, we need to have subject-verb agreement. Students is plural, so we need to use study and conjugate the verb to study as study rather than studies. These should be, yeah, so great job, everyone. If you got it correct in the chat, it sounds like you all did a good job. So we'll move on to the next example, the next exercise. So now we're going to look at common mistakes with adverbs. These tend to be a little bit more difficult for students compared to perhaps verbs and nouns. So we're going to look at these 4 examples. So number 1, she worked hardly to improve her grade. Number 2, the movie was too interesting. Number 3, he sings good. And number 4, the flowers smell wonderfully. So again, take a moment, think of what might be a mistake in these sentences and correct it.
Well, once again, the answers are coming in pretty quick. So I think maybe if we give people just another moment here, and then I think we can probably give them the answers.
All right, great. Yeah, I'll move on to the answers now then, if lots of people are getting them in the chat. So for the answers here, we want to say for number 1, we want to say she worked hard to improve her grade. Hardly has a very different meaning than hard. So we want to say, right, that she worked a lot, or she put a lot of effort into improving her grades. So she worked a lot to improve her grades. So that would be hard here. While hardly is a word, it doesn't have the same meaning as hard. it would be a bit odd to use hardly in this sentence. So for number 2, the movie was very interesting. To has a negative connotation here, so it would be like saying the movie was too interesting for me to enjoy it, or it was interesting and thus I did not like it. So here we would probably, it would be more appropriate to say very instead of to. For number 3, we want to say he sings well. Good, right, is an adjective, and here we want the adverb, and the adverb here is well. For number 4, we want to say the flowers smell wonderful. This is a rule here that if you have a sense verb, it should be followed by an adjective rather than an adverb. This is something you might just want to memorize if it's something that trips you up or something you find difficult. So in this case, it's always sense verb plus adjective. And you can see here a variety of sense verbs. So look, seem, taste, feel, smell, or sound. All of those will be followed by adjectives rather than adverbs. Great, so now we're going to move on to our final activity for today's live session. In this case, I want you to, out of these 2 options that you have, select the correct one. So for number 1, he is a good, well, or well student. Select good or well, whichever is correct. He studies hard or hardly. Select here the correct one again. We have to leave soon or soonly, or else we will miss the bus. The train is slow, slowly. The train is moving slow, slowly. I didn't have time to eat breakfast before going to work because I had to wake up late or lately today. So choose the correct one out of these pairs. And again, take a moment, put it in the chat if you'd like.
Well, once again, looks like we're getting some good answers here in the chat. Good job, everybody. Let's head over and check out the answer slide, I think.
All right, great. Yeah, we'll move on to show you the answers. So here we want to say he is a good student. He studies hard at school. We have to leave soon or else we will miss the bus. The train is slow. The train is moving slowly. I didn't have time to eat breakfast before going to work because I woke up late today. So these are the answers here. If you have any questions, this is the end of our practice session today. We hope you keep up the good work with the course as you're going through it. And Professor Krista, again, will be back next week to discuss prepositions and conjunctions. If you have any questions about this session, feel free to ask them in the discourse thread, and we'll get to them and answer them as best as we can.
Well, thank you. Thank you for leading us today, Kate. And of course, thank you to everyone in the chat for your participation. As you said, we'll be back next week. Make sure you post any questions to the discourse discussion forum, and we will see you at the same time next week. Thank you, everyone.